You will hear from Acting County Executive Jackson, who will walk through this year's budget, highlighting key investments, the fiscal challenges we are addressing, and our commitment to keeping essential services in place for Prince Georgians. At the conclusion of the presentation, we'll open the floor up for questions from the media. At that time, I'll return to call on you. And for those interested in remote viewing, we are multicasting the presentation via live stream on YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And those recordings will be available on all platforms after the event. So thank you again for being here today. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Acting County Executive Jackson.
Good afternoon. All right, can't do that. Well, hello, and welcome to our annual budget presentation. Today, we will discuss our priorities in the fiscal year 2026 budget and the challenges that we faced as we created this budget. As you know, I am Acting County Executive Jackson, and I took on this role because during Angela Brooks' tenure, I was the Chief Administrative Officer. And county law dictates that if the county executive is no longer able to serve, then the CAO steps in until a new county executive is selected. And we know that the primaries have already occurred and that the new county executive will be formally selected in June, early June of this year. I began, for those of you who don't know my background, began my career in the state's attorney's office before moving into the executive branch of Prince George's County. And I have spent my career working in government. Having held multiple senior leadership positions, I am extremely familiar with the budget process. My goal this year is to produce a fiscally responsible budget that helps move our county forward during a particularly difficult cycle for our government and others in this region. I want to say thank you to our Office of Management and Budget team, led by Director Stanley Early, who I have worked alongside for many years now in the leadership of this government. This is the same team. Stanley and his team led us through the years of the pandemic, and they led us well. Creating this annual budget required our government to come together and think hard about our priorities over the coming year. It also required agencies to come to terms with the reality, frankly, of not getting everything that they believed that they needed. I want to thank everyone involved in this process for their input and for their hard work, because I believe together we have found ways to develop a proposed budget that protects the fiscal health of this county. The past 6 years have been a remarkable time of positive change during which we have made significant investments in our community. This year is no different, but this year is difficult. We have proposed a budget that continues to increase investments in education and in public safety, that continues to meet our legal requirements and provides some protection against what is to come. In this budget, we are assuming the passage of legislation which provides a needed increase in revenue, while being very intentional about not using reserves for ongoing expenses. This year, we know that we must be extremely careful because of the unexpected additional cost, unexpected loss of grants, and unexpected loss of revenue. Loss of revenue that will likely come from the elimination of federal jobs. So we have proposed that we would only use $10 million of reserves to cover one-time costs And that will then help us protect the fiscal health of the county and our bond rating. The importance of maintaining healthy reserves cannot be overstated. The federal government, as we all know, is cutting jobs at a record pace, and a significant portion of this county's income revenue, tax revenue, comes from the 73,000 federal workers that live in Prince George's County. In addition to that, we rely on over $260 million worth of federal grants to support our services, and our grants, as you know, are being threatened. At the federal level, the unusual actions taken by this administration present a new level of uncertainty, of fiscal uncertainty for us. And at the state level, the fiscal year 2026 budget presents major challenges. Governor Moore and the state legislature are working to overcome a more than $3.3 billion deficit. Taken together, when you look at the what's going on at the federal level and what's going on at the state level, this uncertainty has an effect on us. It will have an effect on county jobs, on businesses, and on our residents, as well as programs that the residents have come to depend on. Ultimately, this uncertainty will have a tremendous effect on our finances as well. This is the most difficult budget that I have faced, and my OMB director has said as well that he's been around a little longer than I have, but that this is one of the most difficult budgets that he has faced as well. Why? Because we cannot fully predict our revenues, and we cannot fully predict expenditures, because we do not know at this point, as I stand here, if the state will have us take on additional obligations. Nevertheless, it is our responsibility to put forth a balanced budget, a reasonable balanced budget that takes into account uncertainties. In light of these circumstances, we've made the difficult decision to reduce most agencies' budgets, eliminate a small agency, and cut funding from programs at the Department of Public Works and Transportation, the Office of Human Resource Management, the Department of Permitting, Inspections, and Enforcement, among others. And we've done that to help protect our county finances. The federal government is laying off thousands of employees, creating uncertainty. Prince George's County, and I think I may have said this, has nearly 73,000 federal workers. We host millions of square feet of office space used by the federal government. Layoffs will affect income and will affect property tax revenues. It is true we do not yet know the specific impact that layoffs will have on our county revenues, but we do know that the effect can be negative. Mass layoffs will hurt families and our community as a whole and will impact the local economy. In fact, we had a job fair yesterday, and over 2,000 persons registered for that job fair. And I believe by the end of the day, about 1,000 of residents, and maybe not residents, actually attended the job fair. Whether or not those are people that have already lost their jobs or people that are concerned, we know that there is uncertainty in the air. As we struggle to address this uncertainty at the federal level and at the state level, local jurisdictions are being forced to pick up some of the costs, I should say, as a result to the state's budget. Counties in Maryland are being asked to cover at least half the cost for teacher pensions. For Prince George's County, that amounts to $12.6 million. We are also dealing with additional proposed cost shifts and cuts from the state that total more than $40 million in revenue that we must come up with. Our requirement to the blueprint for Maryland's future education funding program will increase by at least $45 million for fiscal year 26, from $909 million to $954 million. And as we speak, the General Assembly is considering whether or not to add in another $15 million for the blueprint. Look, we are committed. It cannot be said too much. We overstated. It cannot be overstated. We are committed to providing high-quality education for our children. But we also maintain our position that the program costs are not sustainable long-term, and something must be done to help pay for the program. With action still happening at the State House, the total amount of fiscal obligations we will have remains unclear. We will not know the true impact to our budget until sine die on April 7th. Last year, in bridging our deficit, we were able to make strategic cuts our residents did not feel. This year will be different. With that said, it's important to also point out that we are preserving many programs and initiatives that our residents care about. And we have taken into account feedback that we received from our budget listening sessions this year. We have evaluated all of our major funding obligations with the same idea in mind. During a difficult budget year, we're asking ourselves these questions: what's working and what do our residents need? Our fire department will still train new recruits. Our police department will still train new officers. Our students will have the resources they need to access new opportunity. We're still making investments in healthcare, though it may not be at the level that we would like, and we're still working to protect the environment. This past year, we made progress for Prince Georgians. We had major accomplishments that help us move forward with our goals for the county. Building on our success with the Alternative Construction Finance Program, we've broken ground on 3 of 8 new schools through Phase 2. Robert Frost K-8 in New Carrollton, Templeton Elementary School in Landover, and Fairwood Elementary in Mitchellville. We've also preserved an additional 435 affordable housing units through our right of first refusal program in Central Gardens, Millwood Townhomes, Pleasant Homes, and Capitol Square. In our continuing efforts to improve procurement for county-based businesses, we established last year, with the help of our friends, our partners from Council, the Office of Procurement, to improve efficiency and accelerate progress on how our county-based businesses get involved. Here we have a snapshot of all funds from fiscal year 2024 to our proposed budget for fiscal year 2026. This budget, as you can see, includes $267 million in grant funding. I highlight that number because we believe it is vulnerable. Our general fund revenue increase is due to income taxes recovering and steady growth in property taxes, and does assume additional revenue from the telecommunications tax legislation that we sent to Council a couple of weeks ago. It also does not assume reduced revenue as the result of any additional property tax credit. In total, we are proposing a balanced $5.7 billion budget for fiscal year 2026. You can see we have proposed $4.78 billion in total revenues, representing a year-over-year increase. Our general fund revenues break down into a few major categories. The largest source of funds is aid to the Board of Education, followed by property taxes and income taxes. The Board of Education, as you know, also accounts for our largest expense, followed by public safety. We have only 19% of our budget available for all other government services. So let's take a minute to focus, if we could, on Board of Education spending. Our fiscal 2026 budget increases funding for the Board of Education by $112 million over last year's budget, for a total of $2.91 billion. We are funding education well. This includes $954.2 million for the Blueprint Education Funding Program. In addition to the $112 million we have provided, $42.6 million in operating funds to support the Alternative Construction Finance Program to build schools for our children. And as a reminder, our Blueprint number may still increase by $15 million, depending on what the state does. Here, we have a summary of our capital program improvement expenditures. For in-depth information, we will provide the entire proposed budget online so that you can peruse at your leisure. Here you can see some of our major expenditures for our capital improvement program. These projects include things like stormwater management, our community college, renovations, and school construction. It's important to note that because of the challenges that we were facing in this year, we really combed our budget to make sure that we could achieve any inefficiencies, that we could change any efficiencies that we saw. And we found efficiencies in our capital improvement program that reduce our need to sell as many bonds in fiscal year 2025 and 2026. In short, it saves the county money. Despite the cuts we've had to make, our budget does make investments that promote health, well-being, and stability in Prince George's County. We've used our funds in a way that supports effective programs while trying to minimize the impact of cuts to spending overall. Part of our education funding includes $59.6 million in pre-K investments. And we've also set aside $143 million for the Prince George's Community College, $1 million for the Summer Youth Enrichment Program, which unfortunately we did have to decrease, and funding for school-based health centers. As I mentioned before, we're also keeping up with our Alternative Construction Finance Program with $42.6 million in funds. And this program will deliver 8 more schools for our community. We've increased the budget for the Prince George's County Fire EMS Department to over $314.9 million, and this includes funding for 95 new recruits and the paramedic program. We've increased funding for the Prince George's County Police Department to $424.3 million. This includes funding for 110 new recruits. We know that it is important to our residents that they not only feel safe, but that they be safe. As well, we have $63 million for the Office of the Sheriff, $44 million for the Office of Homeland Security, and $28.3 million for the state's Attorney's Office. Our budget includes funding for the Prince George's County Police Department Police Athletic Leagues, which helps us with our crime reduction efforts across the county. We're investing $25.5 million of capital improvement funds for curb and road rehab projects, $2.7 million for renovations at the animal shelter, and an additional $3 million for police station renovations. We're also keeping up investments for Vision Zero pedestrian safety program, as well as funding for electrical vehicle charging. And then $3.5 million to support our new permitting and licensing system, which has been received well by the community. This year, we're allocating $143.7 million for health and human services. This includes funding for the Department of Family Services, for Veteran Services, and for the Health Department. We're investing almost $105.7 million in capital projects towards emergency and transitional shelters, which we know are needed for our vulnerable residents. We're also investing $24.9 million in mental health and substance abuse programs. We're allocating $218.6 million for the Stormwater Management Fund, and we have allocated funding for street sweeping and clear the curb. But we've had to reduce funding for litter pickup, clean lots, and funds for the facilitation of our climate action plan. Over the past few years, we've made tremendous progress on economic development attracting new businesses, building new communities, and securing investment from multiple public and private sources. This year, we're keeping up with that momentum with $9.6 million invested in economic development programs. The Department of Public Works and Transportation, $34 million for the Central Avenue Connector Trail, and $20.2 million in the Housing Investment Trust Fund to continue to preserve affordable housing for our residents. In our fiscal year 2026 budget, we took steps to overcome a large deficit. We have had to make tough choices. Despite historic uncertainty, we've made continued investment in education and public safety while making necessary cuts in other areas. Residents will feel these cuts, but they will help us maintain the fiscal responsibility that's needed to protect our community. The past 6 years have been a remarkable time of positive change for our county. And with prudent fiscal decisions now, we can keep making progress during a period of uncertainty. We must take steps now to shore up revenues. With increasing demands on our budget and increasing uncertainty about our revenues, we again had to make some very difficult decisions to prevent much deeper problems with the Prince George's County budget going forward. I said to you when I came before you 3 months ago, when I just took the office of acting county executive, I said that my job was to make sure that this government remained stable, that my job was to make sure that the trains continued to run. And my job is to make sure that I turn over the best government to the next county executive. And that is what we have, that is what we believe, that is what we are trying to do with this proposed budget. We look forward to working with the council as they review our proposed budget. I see the vice chair in the room. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, for being present, as well as Council Member Oriata. I don't know that I see other council members, but I thank you for being present. We look forward to working with the council as they review our proposed budget, consider what is good for our residents, and strive to make wise decisions that reflect our current reality. Thank you, and I'm willing to answer any questions that you may have.
When you talk about ways to, to maintain tax revenue?
Well, we've certainly taken into account what the news that we have received from the federal government. We know that we have many agencies that are located in Prince George's County, as federal agencies that are located in Prince George's County, and workers that are in Prince George's County, not just federal workers, but contractors that are in Prince George's County. We're unable at this moment to know exactly what that means in terms of loss of revenue if persons were to lose their jobs. But what we do know is there is uncertainty. And so when there's uncertainty, we have to be conservative, right? And so one of the things, as I said earlier, one of the things that we've done in this budget is we've made sure that we limit the use of reserves and only use a very small amount of reserves for one-time offenses. Why? Because we may need those reserves in the coming months. And so So to answer your question, we are not yet able to quantify what loss of revenue may look like for Prince George's County, or frankly, increased expenditures to try and support our residents. But we do know that in times like this, you tighten up and you don't spend what you don't have.
You mentioned publicly and privately just how much of an impact the state budget could have on you, to the state lawmakers in Annapolis and the governor's office. But what sort of response have you gotten from them in terms of maybe how they're going to consider your worries and concerns about their actions there in Annapolis and how it could impact the budget here?
Well, the state has a difficult job as well. Look, they're facing a $3.3 billion deficit. And frankly, Maryland is one of the many states that is, I would say, at more risk than other states around the country as it relates to federal actions, just because of the sheer number of federal workers that we have in Maryland. So I sympathize with the state and the work that they have to do. We've certainly had discussions with our state delegation and our state partners, and we've explained to them what cost shifting would do. We are assuming a certain amount of cost shifts in our budget, but we have said, look, if you go beyond this, it really is going to hurt us. So we've had those discussions, and we're hoping to continue to have those discussions up until they make the final decisions.
Give any response as to what those concerns are? What are they saying to you about that?
That they understand, but they're in the same situation. Again, they're open. They're open to hearing from us, but they've got an education plan that's expensive, and we're saying it's expensive, but it's expensive for the state as well. And so they're grappling with trying to fund, that's just one example, the education plan. So I think that our delegation is working to, they've got a difficult situation that they're in, but we've certainly been vocal about the concerns that we have in the county.
Hey, Tom Resley, Channel 7. Along those lines, with the blueprint.
Oh, there you go.
Sorry. With the blueprint, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, is this worth it? Is this really going to improve education enough to make it worth this hit you're taking to your budget every year? And what would you like to see the state do specifically to lessen the burden on counties like Prince George's when it comes to the blueprint?
Of course, the education of our children is critical. And I would never say that education, ensuring that every child gets a quality education, is not worth it. But with that being said, we've said it from the beginning, the blueprint is expensive. And we educate some of the more vulnerable children. We, Baltimore City, educate some of the more vulnerable children in our state, the most vulnerable children in our state. And what that means with a formula like the blueprint is that we end up paying the most. And it's difficult because we are not the wealthiest county in the state. And so I'll just say we have said from the beginning that this is going to be a challenge for us. But our budget does contemplate the increased spending under the blueprint formula. I thank you so much for being here today. Thank you.